Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 236 of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's episode is Healing Without Borders, an interview with Laura Arnal. My name is Matt Sabatello.
My name is Richard Johannesson.
So for everybody listening, this is a really important episode because Laura taught us that it's possible to heal even if you have limited finances and you don't have local doctors that truly understand Lyme and can help you overcome this horrible disease. Laura had to work between Germany, the United States, Belgium, and France to find doctors that can help her understand the big picture of what was really going on in her body, and to also find affordable medication that she can use to recover from Lyme disease. Laura couldn't take care of herself or her family, but today she feels the best she ever has, and she's one of the leading Lyme advocates in Germany and France. So without further ado, Healing Without Borders and Laura Arnal.
Hey, Laura Arnal, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today. I am super excited, and it's a lot of emotion and joy for me to meet you.
Well, we're really excited to have you on the podcast as well. And we know that you've been very popular in the French and German communities, and you told your story in those languages. And now this is the first time that you're actually sharing your really powerful story to an English-speaking audience. So we want to thank you for being willing and being brave enough to now come and share your story in English. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you too.
So Laura, talk to us about where you're currently living.
Well, I'm currently living in Germany, in Cologne, in north of Europe, and I come from the south of France, and I'm living in Cologne since more than 10 years now. I am both French and German, and well, my kids are saying that I speak English with a German accent now. Sometimes I might put some German words maybe when I speak English, but I let you decide which accent you want for me. But I grew up in France in a French family.
So our children, of course, are always going to be our greatest critics. My 4 children are more critical of me than anyone else. So talk to us about your family setting. Who do you live with, and how many children do you have?
Well, I've got 3 kids, Emily, Felix, and Juliette. Emily is 21, Felix is 18, and Juliette 15. And my husband, Emmanuel. And we are all French at the beginning. And I grew up then in France, in a small town near Toulouse in the south of France. And I was in a loving family, structured also. And I have got a brother, Vincent, a sister, Claire. And we were educated with good rules, strong rules, but with a lot of joy and love and open mind, maybe too.
So, Laura, what triggered your family to move from France to Germany approximately 10 years ago?
Well, my husband, Emmanuel, was working for the Ford Motor Company. And we had the opportunity to go to Germany for this company, and because he could work for Ford Europe. And because of my education, I think well, my dad, my mom used to travel a lot. They had the chance to spend 1 year in Boston at the MIT, and told us a lot about their American experience and everything. So they certainly made me want to travel to discover other countries. And maybe that's what we are in Germany now.
Okay, so let's talk about your childhood in France and what that childhood was like. You already shared with us that it was a very loving family. You had a brother and a sister that you're growing up with. So talk to us about your parents. What did they do for work? And what kind of a educational environment did you grow up in when you were in France?
Well, my mom was a math teacher at in my school. And well, I had to behave because she was aware of all my marks from her colleagues. And Papa was a researcher in statistics at the faculty of Toulouse. So when I was a kid with good grades at school, and I did the required homework, But what I liked most was the contact with my friends and meeting new people. I did a lot of tennis and synchronized swimming, but I was terrible at piano. Well, I was interested in many things and did a lot of sewing also. And at school, I liked math and science subjects and foreign languages. So I started there to learn German and a bit of English. And well, my parents, they pushed me always to go after my projects and not to be afraid of it. Like, be confident and do it.
So Laura, talk to us about what you were dreaming about becoming during this very enriching childhood experience that you had. Where did you see yourself working after you graduated from high school?
Well, I first wanted to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to study medicine, which is funny because the result of it is that I did engineer studies. Well, which is even more funny now because I'm a Lyme patient advocate now, and I have trained as an expert patient at the Sorbonne Medical University in Paris, which is a bit like a clin d'œil, I would say in French.
Well, so I think it is really interesting, and we'll pause here for a moment, that you wanted to be a lawyer, which is an advocate. You wanted to be a doctor, which of course is a healer at least a healer of the physical body. And then of course you ultimately became an engineer, and we've certainly learned as folks who have interviewed hundreds of people with Lyme disease, that you need to have an engineering skill set to re-engineer the experience that you had in order to be able to heal. So you sort of began life with or you began your early educational experience with this sort of trio of goals, which have all come to serve you really well. And we're going to talk about that during the transformational portion of this story. So you're a young kid, you're pursuing, an interest in the law, an interest in medicine, and you ultimately become an engineer. How did you become an engineer? Where did you go to school? And why did you ultimately settle on an engineering degree?
Well, and the reason I chose it, in fact, is that the medical exam in France was and is still very hard the first year. And I didn't have enough confidence, I think, in myself to do it. So in high school, I took competitive exams for engineering studies, and I was accepted in Paris. So I thought that if I had the chance to be accepted, it was for me, it would be good. And I went from Montauban and Toulouse, south of France, to live in Paris. And it was a big change for me, actually. It's great to be a student in Paris, and there are always nice opportunities to go out, to go to the theater, to meet people. Well, I can say I wasn't passionate about my studies, but I really enjoyed getting there and starting to work for Accenture then as a change management analyst. It opened some doors. And with Accenture, I had the opportunity to go to Chicago for training. I met some great colleagues. But the best thing in Paris, what happened? It's that I met my husband, Emmanuel.
So talk to us about that. How did you meet your husband, and how did the two of you decide to meld your lives together so that you would ultimately have a family and now the 3 children?
Well, it's not really easy and a bit private to explain a love story like this, but we met in Paris. He's an engineer also, and well, I think we spoke the same language, and we were together, and we got married at a very young age. We will celebrate this year our 25th anniversary.
Oh, congratulations!
Yes, thank you. That's crazy, but that's great. And then we went to live in Lyon, near the French Alps, and we had our first child there, Emily. We came back to live in Paris, and we had Félix, the second child. And then we moved to Nancy. Nancy is in the northeast of France, where we had our third kid, Juliette. And each time we moved, I could find a a new job, and I was working full time, playing tennis, sewing, partying, doing all the stuff you can do when you are not in pain, when the life is open to you, you know. And at this point, sometimes 2009, we had the opportunity to move to Germany, and then we went there, and that was I quit my job. We sold the apartment and we moved to Cologne.
So you were living this sort of picturesque life. You had a wonderful husband, you had 3 children, you were living a very nice social life, you were playing tennis, you were sewing, you were just living the dream, and then you started to get sick. So talk to us about when your illness began to surface and what the early symptoms were.
Well, when we moved to Cologne, we decided at this point to make a great trip. We took a plane to New York. We rented an RV and traveled from New York to Boston. And we visited a few very nice places: New Haven, Newport, Cape Cod, Boston, Salem, Greenwich. And we met there families of friends we had there. And we did very nice activities. And at that time, no travel guides said, be careful with ticks. I had no idea about it. And we slept in campsites for RV. And well, they are great memories, except that from the 4th day, after having spent a bit of afternoon in a friend's garden, I felt strange. And I was a feeling of being sick in my body. It was very strange. And I said, of course, I told me it's due to jet lag. And I remember it very well. And when we got back from Boston, we arrived in Rye at our friends Raphael and Isabel Place house, and we went for a jog. And I couldn't breathe like normal. I couldn't breathe like I could before. And it was a bit funny. And when we returned from the trip, we went to France to meet my family. And I had like 18 hours of sore throat and a slight fever. And in this case, you find always explanations. You come back from a long flight, it's jet lag, you're tired, everything is normal, and it's like a virus, it's the air conditioning, it's nothing. And it went away. And at that point, I was 35, and I started this new challenge to live in Germany. And
so, Laura, let's pause there for a second. My heart is breaking that you came to the Northeast in the U.S. You came actually to New York, the state where Matt and I are currently living, and you had this desire to have this adventure with your family. And you took an RV and you went through Connecticut, which is the birthplace of Lyme disease, and you were camping in various places in Connecticut. And then you went up to Massachusetts, where, of course, there's also a great deal of Lyme disease and a great deal of risk. And here you are, your nice little family on this adventure, going camping, enjoying the outdoors in the beautiful northeastern US. And you had no idea, despite doing research and using various travel guides, that you and your family were at terrible risk of contracting this disease if you didn't take precautions to protect yourself.
That's exact. And the funny thing is that I was aware of Lyme disease, but I wasn't aware that Lyme was in this area. And I can remember something very strange. The first time I heard about Lyme disease was in my freshman year from my biology teacher. And she was telling us about animals who are transmitting disease to humans. And she talked about ticks and how Lyme disease was difficult to diagnose. And at this time, it was 90, maybe 88 or something. And I remember very well, still today, what she told to us. She said, this disease gives a facial paralysis. And very often, we don't make the link with Lyme disease. And I still remember that day. You remember I wanted to be a medical doctor or lawyer. And I said to myself in the classroom, I can see me again and still. And I said, remember this. Don't forget it. It will certainly help somebody. And I felt like I had a great power in me. And I say, with this information, you are going to save somebody someday. But, you know, I knew about Lyme disease, but I had no idea that ticks were everywhere spread in Connecticut.
So talk to us about how your symptoms were now developing when you returned home to Europe, and what types of doctors and healthcare professionals you sought help from to try to diagnose your healthcare issues.
Well, it came very slow. A few weeks later, we were in Germany, very happy of our life, and I started to be kind of sad. Even if I loved my new life, I had symptoms of depression. And then I had a few sinusitis with fevers, genital infections, lower back pain, stomach pain, tooth pain, joint problems, tachycardia, milk production, which was crazy because I could almost breastfeed a baby, night sweats, well, dark urine in the morning, skin lesions. Above us, I felt very strange and I couldn't quite explain how. And someday I said to a doctor, you know, I feel small animals under my skin. And I can draw you a picture. Then what is answering the doctor? He says, go to a psychiatrist. It's not okay. It's in your head. And every time I made an appointment, for example, for a knee problem or a tooth problem, I went to the doctor and the pain was away or the pain was somewhere else. And it was a big problem for me. And because we had moved, the doctors didn't know me. And I have to explain in German what I felt. And they couldn't know how I was before. So it was a big problem for me, but also for the doctors who met me.
So Laura, let's pause there for a second and talk about, in total, how many different doctors did you see between the time that you first started to feel the symptoms that you felt when you were in the US and you had taken your adventure with your family, and the time when you were finally diagnosed with Lyme disease?
It lasts 5 years. And within these 5 years, I had to see 69 practitioners, healthcare practitioners, and 69 didn't speak about Lyme disease. The 70s said to it,
and
which is crazy.
We'll get to Dr. 70 in a minute, and that is an exciting part of the story that we do want to explore with you. But let's stay with the 69 different doctors, or not just doctors, but healthcare practitioners that you saw during that 5-year window when you were suffering from these various symptoms and you were not diagnosed with Lyme disease. Now, by the way, before we get there, you shared with us that you were aware of Lyme disease based on information that you were given as a freshman in college. At any time before you got to the 70th doctor who finally did diagnose you with Lyme disease, did you ever have any signals or any sense that perhaps you were suffering from Lyme disease before you finally got your diagnosis?
I didn't have any sign in me to tell it to me, but I had exterior signs. Because once my Felix, my son, had been beaten by a tick, and I saw the tick, and I said, "We have to be very careful. He could have Lyme disease." And he got some antibiotics, but I didn't know, and I couldn't make a link between Lyme disease early stage and chronic Lyme, what I call long Lyme, and that's crazy when I think about it. I had it on a plate in front of me, and I didn't think about it. And you know, all the symptoms were different, and I can speak about the difficulties I had to walk. And someday my legs couldn't carry me. And how would you make a link with Lyme disease? And you've no balance, you're dizzy. What is it?
So your awareness of Lyme disease from when you were in college was more an awareness of acute Lyme disease, which is something that you as a mother were able to be careful about and take proper steps to protect Felix when he was bitten by a tick, but you never understood enough about the disease going from an acute to a chronic form to help you in your own diagnostic journey.
I had no idea about it. And the doctors didn't give me idea about it, you know? And the thing is that I can explain you, I was someday sitting in a chair was too painful for me. I had so much pain. And when I stopped walking, it was going to be worse. And the nights were very complicated. And someday an orthopedist asked me to go to the hospital because I couldn't carry myself. Well, and I was diagnosed with a small herniated disc in the back.
A herniated disc, yes.
Thank you. So tiny that they couldn't believe, they couldn't understand why I was so much in pain. And it was a shame for me, you know, because I couldn't walk. And it was actually called meningoradiculitis, but I was misdiagnosed. And so, you know, I was given always different paths to think it's something else and not to let me think about Lyme disease. And the doctor, instead of giving me antibiotics, I had 17 epidural cortisone shots, 1 per day, 11 days long, and then 1 per week, 6 weeks long. And the doctor said, okay, you can't walk, so we hope you will be able to walk again each time. So they started again and again. And each shot made me actually sicker. My immune system was going down. And nobody could understand. It was 1 shot, 1 faint. Crazy. And they wanted me to walk after the epidural cortisone shot. And I was so dizzy. And I can explain it. My husband was often with me. And I remember a well-known orthopedist who laughed and said to Emmanuel, if she reacts like this all the time, she must drive you crazy. So, you know, it's not so easy, you know. I wanted to be a good patient, you know. I wanted to help the doctor. I wanted to believe in it. I wanted to live. And I was super weak, like a 90 years old grandma. And at the hospital, they gave me a wheelchair, and they tried to lay me on a hot clay blanket, you know. And that's called fango. I don't know if you've got it if you use it in the US, and in Germany it's very common. And the idea is it's very warm, and it's to calm your back. And 20 minutes later, I faint because it was like an infrared sauna or something with Lyme disease, you know. And they thought I had mental problems.
So Laura, let's stop here and explore this in a little bit more detail. So you shared with us that you were having these migrating symptoms, right? And which is typical of Lyme disease, right? We have these migrating symptoms. And one of the reasons why so many doctors often diagnose us with mental illness is because our symptoms are migrating. And now, so that's the first problem, of course, we see as a pattern with Lyme disease. But now we have a second problem that you've now identified, which is typical as well. You now went to a specialist, you went to an orthopedist, and the orthopedist diagnosed you with a herniated disc. But what the orthopedist had said to you initially was, hey, this herniation is so small that it shouldn't be causing the neurological problems that it's causing, right? That the herniation is not large enough to cause an impingement that would cause you to have the challenges with ambulation or walking because it wasn't big enough. Yet, even though the doctor knew that the herniation wasn't big enough, and even though the herniation should not have been causing the type of neurological symptoms it was causing, the doctor still treated this now with steroids, right? Now, here's, of course, the real tragedy and we see this pattern time and time again, where we have a doctor who knows that you shouldn't be managing the symptoms that you're managing based on the objective testing that he or she or they looked at, yet they treat it. Now, They give you a steroid shot, which we know steroids are immunosuppressive. And what happens is your symptoms get worse. You tell the doctor that your symptoms are worse, but the doctor gives you a second shot. You take the second shot, which now suppresses your immune system even more. You get even more sick, and they give you a third shot. And it just goes on and on and on, because they weren't looking at the larger patient. They were treating the symptoms. But even more frustrating from my perspective is they were treating symptoms that they knew should not have been caused by the very diagnostic tools that they were using for determining the herniation. So give me your reaction now that you've had a chance to look back at that experience, how you feel about doctors treating you aggressively and ignoring the impact that the treatment was having on your symptoms.
That's, it's kind of complicated, because I think at that time I wanted to be a good patient, and I made myself believe that I was getting the right treatment. And my spirit was not able anymore to analyze what was happening in my body. And that's what I see now. And what happened is one day a doctor told me, you will always have this pain. You have to now to take care of your husband and your kids. And it was so hard to hear. It made me crazy at that point. And I started to understand how alone I was. And I started to say, okay, you have to trust yourself. You have to trust your symptoms, your pain, and try to let the doctor understand that I was not exaggerating. But now today, well, I felt very alone in front of the doctors. And even if Emmanuel was with me and Emmanuel said to them, you know, my wife, she's suffering, she's in pain, and you have to believe her. And the title of my book was meant to be at the beginning, the day you will believe me. And that was my problem. Nobody would believe me. And in this case, you lose your ability to read your body, and you lose your being confident in your body. And now with the doctors, well, I have no anger with them. You know, I said they didn't know. And now we have to do something much more clever. We have to teach them this disease.
Okay, so let's unpack this, Laura, because you've just given us a really, really powerful analysis that has so many different parts that we have to explore together. So let's begin first with belief. You said that at the time that you were being treated by the orthopedist, you believed that the treatment that he was giving you was going to make you better. So let's first talk about how important it is to believe that you're going to get better. And if you don't believe you're going to get better, and you don't believe that this treatment is going to work, how you will not get better. Let's talk about belief first.
That's a huge question. Believing in me and let the other believe in me also. Okay. And I think it was something huge for me that my husband always believed me, and my parents. They said, okay, we trust you. We know you're in pain. We know you're not the Laura you were before. And so that's it. But I think the only clue I think right now to say is, and that's what I'm maybe teaching sometimes or saying to the patients I will accompany with life as a health coach and Lyme coach, is to say you are in your body, and you know your body better than everyone else. You know what's good for you, and you're different from me, and everybody is different with this disease. So you have to give your voice. You have to say it.
Okay, so let's talk about that, Laura. So you're going through this experience where you're seeing now 69 different doctors, and I don't know where the orthopedist was that we had just talked about in that line of doctors, but you believed that the treatment was right. But now, of course, you went through all of these different doctors who were ultimately causing you medical trauma because they were telling you that there was nothing wrong with you, or they were treating something that really wasn't wrong with you and you were getting worse. So talk to us about how the medical trauma that you suffered from all of these practitioners impacted your ability to believe in yourself and to listen to the signals that your body was giving to you.
I think this problem made me stronger, because I had to fight. I had to fight in German, but I went to see doctors in France, in Belgium, in Germany, and tried to say, hey, listen to me, I've got this. And then I tried to have a huge image to look at all my symptoms, and I did like an Excel sheet, and I saw I had 40 symptoms together, which was a lot. And I remarked, if you speak to a doctor, after 5 symptoms, he won't hear you anymore. 5 is too much already. So I started to cut me in some places, and then I had a heart problem, heart issues with my fatigue and everything. And I slept poorly. I had always to take naps, and I never felt okay. And I had to get an heart operation, because I had junctional tachycardia. That's called, the operation was called cryoablation. You will tell better as I do. It was like my heart, say it, if you can say it.
Ablation.
Ablation. And my heart was sometime beating 220 per minute, 4 to 5 hours long. And it was another problem, and it was so exhausting for me, and it made me so weak. And I explaining it to you because in the operation, the doctor found another heart disorder. And at this time, they called it idiopathic. Idiopathic, it means that this is it, this is there, but we don't know where it comes from. And then I discovered like a life where everything for me was idiopathic. All the doctors started to say, okay. If they believed me, they said, okay, but it's idiopathic. Crazy. And that's a problem. That's the next problem with believe me. Then they found a solution.
Well, let's go back, and because you're giving us so much, and we do want to talk about Lyme carditis, and Matt is going to talk to you more about some of these symptoms that you were dealing with. But I want to go back to the point where you're talking about belief, right? So you said that you wanted to believe that the treatment you were receiving was going to be successful, or you knew it wouldn't be successful. Yet the treatments were not working, but you continue to allow the doctor to provide you with the treatment, even though it wasn't working, because you believe so much in the doctors and the treatment they were giving you that you were not believing in your own signals, in your own body signals, to tell the doctor that you were getting worse rather than you improving. So we have these different forms of belief that we have to manage: belief in us versus belief in the doctors that we're working with, right? Now, you also said that your husband and your parents continue to believe in you even when doctors didn't believe in you, where they either said it was in your head, or it was idiopathic, or it was unique to you, or whatever terms they were using. Your parents and your husband always believed in you and always believed that you were sick. What role did you play in supporting your parents and your husband so that they could continue to support you in the belief that you were not dealing with emotional illness or psychosomatic symptoms, but you were in fact really sick, and that there was a solution out there for you?
Well, I think I spoke a lot. I allowed me to speak about it a lot. And once, that's maybe a tip for you or for some of you, I said to my husband, we will take a 2-minute time. And in this 2 minutes, I will exactly explain to you what I'm feeling. And I said, now I have a knife in my back. Now I have a weird feeling in my foot. Now I have a huge problem in the head. And it was like, wow, that's a lot what you do have. And I said, that was 2 minutes. But for me, it's 24 hours a day. And that was something to share that helped. And but it's a big question to say, how can I share my pain? And I think you can't share your pain by telling he's crazy, he doesn't want to believe me. You have to explain in it, to say, I'm feeling this, I think this, I try my best. And that's the problem, is because the sickness is invisible. So everybody was saying to me, if I put a lot of small makeup on it and said, oh, you look great today, nice. And I said, if you knew how it is burning in my body, you wouldn't say that. And that's the big problem with invisible disease. And my husband said often to me, you have to explain it to me. I can't know if you're okay now or not, even if you knew me.
So you believe that the reason your parents and your husband were so supportive of you when you were being either medically gaslit or you were suffering medical trauma is because you were communicating your feelings to your husband and your parents on a regular basis. So communication was the key to having your support system continue to support you when you were having the challenges with the medical community.
But then you've got a problem, because I had a problem, because then I started to have cognitive issues. And I started to have more and more memory problems.
So Laura, when did the cognitive issues surface, and how did that impact your ability to communicate your pain to your husband and to your parents?
Say it again, please. How did
when did your cognitive problems surface? Yeah. And how did the cognitive problems that you were suffering interfere with your ability to communicate with your support system, meaning telling your husband and your parents how you were feeling?
I think it was in 14, I think, like 5 years after the beginning, after the tick bite, especially. And I had more and more memory loss. I didn't know what time of the day it was, and if it was the morning, the afternoon. I couldn't watch a movie anymore. I couldn't remember in the middle what had happened at the beginning. And I can give you, I couldn't find my words in French, especially in the mother tongue, and it was a big problem. And to give you an example, someday I had to buy a printer in a shopping mall, and I went to pay my parking fees, and I put the huge package of the printer next to me. I paid. A few hours later, I was back home, and I said, well, where did you put the printer? And I had forgotten it on the parking lot, and that's a memory problem. So, I was, as an engineer, I used Post-its everywhere. I made my phone ring, and I made to-do list and something I had to do it, but I can remember it was as though they've seen it. My parents, my husband could see it, but I couldn't explain so much. I said, I know I'm losing memory. I'm not good at it, but I don't know what it is. And I even made some tests at the hospital, memory test. And the craziest thing is that for this test, you concentrate so much that you're good. You're good at it. And they said, no problem. It's in your head.
So Laura, you're bouncing around from doctor to doctor, country to country. Your symptoms are getting worse and worse. Your support system is supporting you, but then you lose the ability to support your support system because your cognitive issues are getting so severe that you can't communicate any longer. As I'm watching this train go down the track and I'm watching it getting ready to run into the wall, the question that is coming to me as a father is, how are your children doing, and how are you doing with interacting with them, or your inability to interact with your 3 children?
I tried to explain a lot and to say, well, I'm not okay, but it will be okay. And they had a big feeling that it wasn't normal. And they started to help me a lot. And someday as a mother, I said, okay, tonight I can do the cooking. I can't. It's too complicated for me. And Emily, the oldest daughter, said, Mama, no problem. I'm doing it. go to bed. It's okay. But they suffered. That's clear. And I can remember the day when I had the Lyme disease diagnosis. It was such a joy, and I said to the kids, I will be okay. We know what I have. And Juliette, the smallest one, she was like 7, and she said, so mommy, you will be able to carry me, to take me in your arms. And
so
I
sorry.
did cry.
Yeah, I mean, you're making me cry now.
Mm.
So let's talk about one more piece of the cognitive challenge before I have Matt spend a little bit more time talking with you about your developing symptoms. Did you ever suffer any rage or any anger when your cognitive problems developed? Because I know you were suffering for at least one co-infection that in many cases causes people to suffer anger and or rage.
Well, it's hard to remember for me because my goal every day was to live, and I think my body and my mind were together to try to survive, and so I had to do all the thing I could, but I couldn't do a lot. I was a lot in bed, and I had to spend. I was suffering, so the rage was I have to find something, but someday you lose this rage. You say, is it worth? Is it worth living like this? I'm bothering all of them around me. Well, I didn't want to go much more, but
I know, but Laura, I'm just wondering whether or not either the disease was causing you to have cognitive impairment that made you angry, or were you getting frustrated with the lack of diagnostic assistance and treatment, or were you grieving the loss of this very healthy life that you had, this really enjoyable life, and then that caused anger? Because there are a lot of different reasons why someone suffering from Lyme disease can get angry, and then of course, who do we of course have our angry bouts with? The people closest to us, our husband, our children, our parents, like the people who are supporting you, the people who ultimately suffer from your anger. Did you ever have any of that happen during this journey?
Yeah, that's clear, but it's a very, very slow process. Once you stop playing tennis, then you stop running because you can't do it anymore. And then you say, no, I can't go out tonight, I'm not feeling good. And then you stop a few things till you're in bed. So you're frustrated, but it's coming not like once in a time, it's coming very slowly. And where I was the most frustrated and with hunger at the moment, it was with doctors. And once what they said to me, it was so hard for me to receive, And for example, one said, you are taking so much medication, it could make you sick. And when you hear this, you say, no, you know how sick I am today? I would die to get some good medication almost.
So Laura, I'm just looking back at everything you talked about with Rich, and you had a very wide set of symptoms. I mean, you were having trouble breathing. You had Lyme carditis in your heart. You had night sweats. You had milk production. You were depressed. You had stomach pain. You had sinusitis. You had genital infections. And yet your doctors were so narrowly focused, and specifically your doctor that you went to for your back, and you got all of these epidural shots of steroids. Now, did these doctors ever consider the other symptoms that weren't in their specialty? And what I mean by that, Laura, is the doctor who was giving you these steroids and these injections for your herniated discs, did they ever consider that you had a ton of other symptoms going on that didn't connect or make sense with herniated discs?
Never. I didn't want to look somewhere else.
And I think that's one of the problems we have with doctors in medicine in general, is they have their specialties, but they can't look beyond their specialty to see what else is going on to make a collective guess to try to help you get a diagnosis that is the root cause of all your symptoms. But the other thing I'm really frustrated about for your journey, and is just so unfair that all of us have to really deal with in the Lyme experience, is you were either told A, that you were crazy because you were passing out when you were getting the heat pad, or because you were reacting a certain way that the doctors didn't want you to react, or B, you were told it was idiopathic, which really means it's a disease of unknown origin, right? You have a disease or you have a condition, but we don't know why. So how did you feel? I mean, you were really sick for over 5 years before you got your Lyme disease diagnosis. What was your emotional struggle like? Did you ever believe it was psychological and possibly all in your head? Or did you always know that there was something deeper physically going on in your body?
Well, first, it was a shame for me. It was a shame for me to be sick and to explain I'm sick. And then I had this problem that if you go to a doctor for a lower back problem, if you start speaking about something else, you are afraid they will say to you, it's in your head. So you don't tell it anymore. You will stop speaking about it. And then once I said, well, maybe it could be that I'm crazy. Okay, let's see. And then I went to a psychologist and I did it. And I said to my husband, okay, I will let me test it just to know, because it could be I'm crazy. And I went to see her, somebody, and after 4 hours with her, for 4 weeks, she said, no, you're suffering. You are in pain, and do something for that. But you're not crazy. You're not depressed. You've got a problem with pain.
So Laura, at what point did Lyme disease get brought on the table? Because we know you finally got diagnosed about 5 years in to your really extreme symptoms. What brought Lyme disease into your mind, and what doctor did you find who ultimately helped you get diagnosed?
It didn't went into my mind. A friend of me, Michaela, a German friend, said to me, you should see this doctor in Germany. And it was very, very complicated to have an appointment with him. He opened to new patients twice a year at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you had to queue and to be sure. Well, it was a fight to get an appointment. And I was on the 2nd of December with him on telephone with the secretary, and I couldn't get one. But of course, a friend of me did have one, and she said, Laura, you're sick, you go first. And that was the gift she made to me. But then I had to wait a few months to have this appointment. And I went there. It was so hard for me to take the car, to put my arms on the wheel. It was so much pain for me. I said, okay, I'm going to another doctor. He will say it's in my head. And this doctor spoke for the first time after like 10 minutes and said, Lyme disease. And you know what I said? I said, no, it can't be possible. I didn't have facial paralysis.
Because you remembered back from what you learned, and you did not have facial paralysis, and you thought, I can't have Lyme disease, right?
I couldn't. That wasn't it. No facial paralysis. And I was told it was it. And he said, yes, you've got it. It might be.
Laura, your friend who recommended this doctor, did this friend think you had Lyme disease and recommend you to this doctor for that reason? Or did she recommend you to this doctor because she thought this doctor could help you?
No, she had no idea about Lyme disease, but this doctor helped somebody with a very special disease. And this doctor was an internist near Cologne, is just retired now, and he used a method which is standard in Germany called biomagnetic resonance. And he made his diagnosis by considering my medical history since my childhood, by asking me where I did travel, and by listening to me. And he did not, for the first time, I was not considered as a piece of paper corresponding to the results of analysis, but I was a person in front of him, and I was a person in pain. And it did take all of my symptoms globally and not separately. And that was the clue, I think.
Laura, did this doctor ask you about your history specifically when you came to the States and you were bit by a tick and started to get sick very shortly after? Was that brought up and discussed with this doctor?
Not at all, because I've never seen the tick. on me. It was like a deer tick and a nymph. So no tick.
So when did you have the epiphany or the realization that you were bit in the States and that was really the beginning of your journey? Did that happen later on?
Yes, because you have to make the puzzle back. And first you have to believe you've got Lyme disease. And then you say, yay, since 1 or 2 years, all my problems are from Lyme disease. And then very slowly you can remember, oh, but when did it start? And then you remember, and more and more. And then I saw, okay, Connecticut, forget it. There are so many ticks there. And we were in a garden on a stone, and I had a small dress, and it was like barefoot, and that was it.
So once you were diagnosed and you believed you had Lyme disease, you basically reverse engineered your path back to the origin, which was the tick bite in Connecticut. And then it all made sense, it sounds like. Then you realized, wow, that's when it began. That's what happened. And without this doctor bringing up Lyme disease, you may have never made that connection back to your trip to the States. But I do want to talk about the testing, though, Laura, that you received, because you mentioned biomagnetism is very popular in Germany. Now, it's used here in the States in alternative medicine for people with chronic Lyme disease, but it's not really mainstream. It's not something that's used regularly by doctors here, especially Western doctors. So give us, if you can, Laura, walk us through what is this biomagnetism testing and what was it like when you saw this doctor?
Well, it's a bit hard to explain in English, but it's about frequency reactions in your body. And the thing in Germany, it's used to diagnose and sometimes to try to cure with a zapper or something. You got it, like Rive machine or something. But it's not official in Germany. It's private, And so the first thing after this joy to think, okay, I've got something, I got a pass. Maybe it could be Lyme disease. So I believe in doctors, so I have to let it test. I do have, as there are serology about it, so let me test it. And then I went to test with an ELISA, and that's why the 71st doctor, my GP, said to me, Frau Arnal, in German, you don't have Lyme disease. ELISA negative. That's not it.
So, Laura, this internist that you went to who said you have Lyme disease and diagnosed you with biomagnetism, you were a little skeptical, it sounds like. So you wanted definitive serology. You wanted blood work to prove it. Is that correct?
Well, I was not so skeptical because I said it's a good pass to think about it. And then I went on Google and I said, okay, that's me. That's exactly me. So I've got it, but I have to show it. And I have to have it on the paper because in Europe, especially, you are a piece of paper for your health, It has to be written on it. And it wasn't. And so the second fight started at this time.
So you knew you had Lyme disease. The specialist that your friend referred to you knew you had Lyme disease, but you couldn't use biomagnetism as an official diagnosis. It wasn't recognized on paper legally for a diagnosis. So you had to get blood work or serology to prove that, and it came back negative because without that paperwork, you wouldn't be able to get proper treatment and have it covered through insurance. Is that correct, Laura?
That's correct. To be covered for the insurance, you have to be positive on the test on the paper. But this doctor could do a private recipe, well, like a private, I don't know the name now, paper to get you antibiotics. And he started to give me Ceftin.
So out of pocket. So you were getting antibiotics out of pocket that you had to pay for because the insurance wouldn't cover it. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's it. But after 5 years, you say, okay, you pay for it. Anyway, you close your mouth and you pay for it. And I took it. I took Ceftin. But I had to wait so long to have a diagnosis. And then if you get something to get it, you take it hard. And then I started like a flower, how we say in French, you start, you don't know. I took it too hard, too fast. And I had huge reactions, huge. And then I called back my doctor. I said, I am dying. I am feeling worse. I am not okay. And the doctor said to me, he was not a Lyme specialist, but he said, okay, you have to reduce the antibiotics. But, that was clear and that was clever to do it. But without an explanation, you don't do it, I was waiting for so long for a cure. I wanted to be cured in the next 3 weeks. So I said, never. I take them. And I took them and them and them. And I didn't know about it.
So Laura, just to be clear, when you got a prescription from this doctor, the internist, this person that you referred to, and you got Ceftin, which is an antibiotic. You took it and you had a really bad reaction, which we know now is a Herx reaction, right? You were killing off so much bacteria that your body was becoming toxic because you couldn't eliminate it fast enough or as fastly as you were killing it off in your body. So when you called this doctor who wasn't Lyme literate, he said to you, reduce the amount. But are you telling us, Laura, that you didn't listen and you kept at the high level and continued to Herx extremely?
That's it. You want to fight, I was a fighter. I want to have my life again. I wanted to have my life again. But at the moment, so it made me understand, okay, the tests are not reliable and I've got Lyme disease and I knew it. And I made this questionnaire from Dr. Horowitz online. I found
Dr. Horowitz?
Yeah, Dr. Horowitz. That's called MSIDS questionnaire.
MSIDS, right? His MSIDS questionnaire from Dr. Horowitz. Yes, we're very familiar with Dr. Horowitz.
And the score was 74. So I said, okay, I've got it. That's it. And then I said, okay, my doctor is not a specialist for Lyme disease. He was very good at diagnosis for me, but he couldn't know everything about everything. And then I went to see a German specialist for that. And,
so before we go there, Laura, I just have a question before we go to the German specialist. So when you did your blood work to try to get on paper to have the insurance recognize your disease to get it covered and recognized, what type of test was done? Because we know that there are different types of strains of Lyme disease. And here in America, most of the time when people get a Lyme disease test, we're only looking for the American strain of Lyme disease, meaning the American type of Lyme disease. Now, we know many people. Rich and I just had a good friend of ours text us last week. She lives in Connecticut, but she has the European strain of Lyme disease. She just found out from doing an IGeneX blood test. Again, out of pocket. It's a private lab in California, but she's never been to Europe, and she got diagnosed with a European strain of Lyme disease living in Connecticut. So I wonder, in Germany, is the same? Are they only looking for the European strain of Lyme, and possibly they missed the boat altogether because you could have had another strain?
Exactly, that's possible, but you never know. Maybe I had an European strain in Connecticut also, because there are birds flying over the Atlantic and we don't know. And I had the ELISA test, but only the ELISA, because if ELISA is negative, then you don't do the Western blot. In France or in Germany or in Belgium, it's like this. So ELISA was enough for the doctor to say no. That's the first official test. But
your primary care physician, your primary doctor, which I think your 71st you referred to that doctor as, told you don't have Lyme disease because you didn't pass the screening for Lyme disease, which is ELISA, which we know is about 50 to 60% accurate. So did your primary care doctor, your 71st doctor, which is crazy, you went to 71 doctors, did that doctor know or tell you that the screening test, the ELISA test for Lyme disease, is about 50 to 60% accurate?
She didn't know anything about it. And I would say 3 or 4 years later, she went to see me someday and said, I'm sorry, I didn't know, which was nice. I was not expecting so much. But it was nice of her, and she said, okay, I learned through it. Which is good.
That's very good and very nice. Most doctors that we hear about on this podcast, Laura, are a little too, their egos are a little too big to admit that and to learn. So the fact that your doctor admitted she didn't know and apologized and learned from you to help other people, I think is a really powerful testament to her to want to learn and grow. And unfortunately for you, it was at your expense, but I think that is a positive sign for her. So now how did you find the specialist in Germany? So you mentioned that the internist who was treating you really didn't know much. You were herxing. He was trying to help, but really wasn't a specialist. So you found the specialist in Germany for Lyme disease. Was it Dr. Google who brought you to this doctor?
Yeah, on Google, on Germany, in Germany, you can find some doctors. There is that's called Borreliose Gesellschaft, and that's a group of doctors. And I found through this, I found the name of 2 or 3 doctors in my area, and I went to one of them in Cologne, and she was very nice. She listened to me, and she said, "Okay, let's." Everything was private, so I not covered by insurance because private, and I wasn't positive on the test. And she said she made a PCR test, LTT test, and everything came back normal. But it showed that I had toxoplasmos, herpes virus, Epstein-Barr, that I have a few things acting weird. Actually, that showed that my immune system was not correctly functioning. And
Laura, all of those things you just described, those 3 things, are commonly associated with chronic Lyme disease. I mean, probably 90% of the people we interview have a diagnosis for those 3 things if they were tested for them, right? I mean, reactivated Epstein-Barr just means your body is compromised and your body can't manage a virus that's been in your body since you were a child, right? So that to me is a sign that, oh, wait, this is probably a confirmation that I do have Lyme disease, right?
That's right. And she believed in it. She said, okay, it came back negative for Borrelia. We will test and we will give you antibiotics. And I had then within 6 months, I had like 15 weeks of pulsed antibiotics. And I had Ceftine, then Zitromax, then Flagyl, minocycline, and then Biaxin. And at the same time, she gave me Samento, Banderol, magnesium, copper, zinc, a few things, but I felt awful. It was a nightmare for me, a nightmare all the time. And at the end of the 6 months, I made this questionnaire from Horowitz again. And I had 74. After 6 months treatment, I was 78.
So you went up. Your number went up.
I went up. I went up. So I said to me, it's not working.
So Laura, I do want to talk more about this in a second, about all this treatment and the pulsing of antibiotics. But before we go there, the specialist you found in Germany, are you comfortable sharing her name?
Well, if you want to, Dr. Müller.
And now, when she ran the blood work, do you recall what lab she used? Because we know there's Armin labs in Germany, we know there's Hygienics out of California, and we know there's a lot of other specialty labs people use. Or was it a local lab somewhere in Germany that was used to run this PCR test you mentioned for Lyme disease?
Well, all the tests she used were sent to Berlin. I think the name is IMD something in Berlin, and they are very good there. They are very well known and good, and have a good reputation. But she did her job. She said, okay, Lyme disease, we have to treat it. She gave me antibiotics, but she didn't know so much probably about co-infections.
But I think you're right. She did her job. And we interviewed Dr. Cameron, who we'll get to in a bit because we know you have an experience with him as well. So we interviewed Dr. Cameron, and Dr. Cameron taught us that he'll do basic blood work, that's covered by insurance. So patients would have to spend a ton of money out of pocket. And even if they're negative, he will treat them from a clinical diagnosis because he knows when somebody has Lyme. And it sounds like that's what this doctor did. She did right by you. She didn't want to make you spend a ton of money out of pocket when she already knew you had Lyme and wanted to treat you for it. So I think we agree with you there on that piece. But let's talk about the difference between an ELISA or an ELISA screening test, which you had done initially, versus a PCR test. Because the first test you had done, the ELISA, was looking for antibodies. And again, it's very, very, there are a ton of false negatives. And that means that there's, again, 50 to 60% of those tests are negative when in fact you have Lyme disease. But a PCR test actually looks for the Borrelia or the spirochetes in your blood. It's actually looking for a direct detection of the spirochete in a blood sample. And so people, when they hear that, they think, well, if that's negative, I definitely don't have Lyme disease. But that's not true, because we've learned from Dr. Cameron and other doctors that the volume of the Lyme bacteria in your body is not that high, meaning you don't have a lot of Lyme in your body, but it still can make you very sick. So when they take a sample of your blood and they look at it, the odds of having the bacteria in that blood are not great. So even when you're doing a PCR test looking for the actual bacteria in your blood, it's not always going to come back positive. Like in your case, it was negative, but you still have Lyme disease, right? So is that something that you understand now and that in discussions with your doctors, you've learned to be the case based on your past testing?
Absolutely. And first, I would say, give you an image. For me, ELISA, it's like counting the police in the town fighting for people who are not behaving correctly.
The criminals.
The criminals. And if the police, if it's Sunday, you don't have so much police outside. And that's an ELISA, which is not so good, I think. And the problem of ELISA for me is that we don't really know who is sick, because you can have Borrelia in you and not be sick. So it's a very complicated problem to start and say, at this point, you are sick with ELISA. And with PCR, okay, the chain reaction, it's a lot better. But my fighting actually is that, like the veterinary in Europe, you know, when an animal has pain, it will take blood where the pain is. And with Lyme disease, they take blood there in your arm. And if you have knee pain, it would be much more clever to take your blood in your knee, because there is the problem at this point. But they don't want to.
But that's really interesting, Laura. We've never had a guest discuss that with us in the past, where when they're doing a PCR test and they're taking blood from your arm, you're better off taking a blood sample from where your worst pain is in your body, because you're more likely to have the bacteria in that part of your body where you're presenting with the most pain, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's it. Because, yeah, I read about it and I said, Dr. Horowitz in his book said, if you want to test for Babesia, take a bath before, do some sport if you can do it, and so that your blood can grow through your body, and so we have much more chance to find it. But go to the place where you are in pain and take it there.
And that's what vets do, or veterinarians do in Europe. So you're saying if vets do it, why aren't we doing it with humans, is what your argument is, right?
That's it.
Wow. So that's really interesting observation. But so I do want to go back to, so now you're treating with a specialist in Germany, and you did pulsed antibiotics, which means you go on antibiotics and then you stop, and then you go back on and then you stop, right? It's an on and off pattern. And you did that with over about 6 different antibiotics for the course of 6 months, right?
That's it.
And those antibiotics were Ceftin, Zithromax, Flagyl, minocycline, and Biaxin, right?
Yeah. And I started to feel a little bit better with Biaxin, which was very interesting, because Biaxin, when you've got heart issues, the doctors won't like to give it. But with me, it was a big change, a small change, not a big change at the moment, but I felt it was a bit better.
But that's a clue, I think, right? Because Biaxin is generally not good for people that have heart or cardiac issues, but you felt better probably because it was getting to the Lyme in your heart, the Lyme carditis. So most people, it won't help because their root cause is not Lyme spirochetes in their heart, but for you, it was killing the spirochetes, which are making your heart so sick, right?
That's it. And it was a sign that it helped against Babesia also. And it made me on the point that maybe I had Babesia. That was one piece of the puzzle.
So Laura, you told Rich earlier that it was hard for you to listen to the signals your body were giving you because all of your doctors were dismissing you and you were so sick and you had all these cognitive impairments. But now I'm hearing from you that you're putting all these connections together. So you're slowly gaining your ability to listen to your body again. And you talked about that earlier, how important it is to listen to your symptoms and listen to your body, and you know your body best. You tell your clients that today. You know your body better than anybody. So do you think that the pulsing of these 6 antibiotics over 6 months were slowly giving you back your cognitive abilities, where you were becoming more and more in tune to know what was going on with your body to make these connections? That's what I'm hearing from you.
I like to think that it helped a lot, because if I had so much herx, that means we did kill bacteria, but it made me not so good, but it gave me something. It gave me the envy to understand. And I had like 30 minutes per day where I could concentrate. And I thought, okay, I have to rescue myself. I have to find a solution. So I took the 30 minutes per day because I am an engineer or something. I want to understand. And I took it to read about Lyme disease, to understand what happened to me. And once, after the 6 months where I was going down and where I was sicker and sicker, and then I did 3 months later, I did again this Horowitz questionnaire, and I went to 93. So it was going down so fast. And I read the books and I looked on YouTube, and once I saw a conference of Dr. Horowitz on YouTube, and at this time I understood I have Babesia and I have probably Bartonella also. And if I don't treat these parasites, I will die. That's it. That's the clue. That's the clue to go in my body. We have to treat this parasite. And the weird thing is that, well, I remember that day when I thought, it was like, wow, that's Babesia. I know what I have. I have to fight it. Let's go to the doctor and to say, hey, you, I've got Babesia. But the problem is, if you go to a doctor and if you say, I've got this, I made my diagnosis, the doctor will laugh and say, go to see a psychiatrist.
But Laura, you were seeing a Lyme specialist, but you did mention that she was not very well versed or didn't understand co-infections well. So did you go to the specialist that was treating you and tell her that you believed you had Babesia based on you listening to your body and learning what was going on, and then trying to discuss that with her to see what her thoughts were?
I did it. I did it in the next few weeks. And I said, could you please think about it? And she said, okay, we'll test it. She was also doing biomagnetic resonance. And she said, okay, we'll test it. I will command. She didn't have all the things to test it. She did command it. And it came to her and she said, okay, I've got them. We test it now. She was open-minded for that. And on that day, I was negative. And I said, but I've got it. I've got all the symptomatology for that. So we have to do it. And I went to a few doctors and nobody wanted to treat it. And that's why once I read again, and once I said to my husband, Emmanuel, we have to go to the States. I will die if we don't treat Babesia. And I went far away because I tried even with a veterinary to give my blood. And I was the small cat, Laura, 2 years old. And the cat was tested for Bartonella and Babesia, many strains and a lot of strains, and it came back negative. And I sent my blood to Switzerland, to France. I did a lot of things to say, hey, guys, I've got Babesia. But no paper would say it. And I said, yes, I'm dying. I was feeling I was dying. I was feeling inside me. And I said, we go to New York, we go to the States, anywhere, we find a doctor and he will help me. And then one day I wrote in this Facebook group, Babesia Buddies, which is a great group. It rescued me. And I said, well, guys, I'm sick, very sick. I try to find a doctor in the States. Where could I go? I want to find a doctor, ILADS doctor. And where could I go? And in 10 minutes, I had like 10 names in 1 hour. And I couldn't speak English anymore. I had no words anymore. I lost it. I had no memories, no memory. And my husband said, okay, I will help you. Not thinking it will be okay also. But I said, we have to. And my husband believed me. And my parents said, okay, if you think you have to do it, let's try it. And I said, I'm sure. But seeing from Europe, you say in November, okay, I would love to go to New York to see a doctor, or to America. And I say, oh, that's fancy to go to New York. It's to see all the Christmas decoration and to do some great shopping. And I say, hey, you don't understand. I am so sick. It's not a problem. If I have to go in the middle of nowhere, I would go there to see the good doctor. And then he called a few doctors and we had an appointment with Dr. Cameron.
Laura, what made you pick Dr. Cameron? Because you said that there was about 10 names given to you in an hour on that Facebook group. So what made you and your husband, and I guess really your husband, because you were so sick that he did the work for you, why did your husband choose Dr. Cameron?
Well, some of the doctors said we can't have new patients. Some of them said, one of them said, it's not possible because you would have to come every month to see me, and it's not okay. Some said, okay, it will be $6,000, and we couldn't afford it. It was, we had to travel to find a place to sleep. It was too much and crazy, you know, for something that I said, hey, I think I have to go to the States, you know. It's like, and Dr. Cameron said, okay, I could have an appointment for you, and they didn't say you have to come back in 1 month. So we said, okay. I knew he was the next president of ILADS, and I had read about him. I had at this time I started because I knew I wanted to go to America, so I had a challenge to learn English again because I with my cognitive problems I lost this ability to speak, and it didn't English couldn't come, so I started to struggle with it and to read in English every day a bit more, and to read and to hear podcasts and everything to be able to explain my pain. And it was a big problem. But Emmanuel was with me, and we went to New York, and it was something very, very, very special, very special. And one day before, it was in December, we went to a Sunday morning service in Harlem to see how it was, because it was new for me. And you won't believe it, but the topic of the preaching was refresh, refuel, and relaunch. And it came to me like, that's it. I am in the good place, you know. And that was it.
That was your confirmation. That was God telling you that this is the right step. This is the right thing.
That was it. And I can remember when we went to Dr. Cameron's office, it was like a huge sensation. I was going to be rescued. I was going to the good place. I was confident, and he would treat me, and I would succeed in it.
So Laura, we always talk about you have to be a detective for yourself. You have to be a symptom detective. And you did that. And you did that probably, and I'm not going to say probably, you did it in harder circumstances than anybody we've ever interviewed. I mean, you sent your blood away on your own to numerous countries in Europe for Babesia and Bartonella, and it came back negative. You had your Lyme literate specialist test you, it came back negative. You even sent your blood to a vet and told her that it was from a cat to get tested, and it came back negative, but you still knew you had Babesia and Bartonella based on your symptoms and what you did to learn and research, and you were determined to find somebody to help you and validate that, which you found, right? So looking back, do you realize how brave you were and how special that is for you to be able to continue to fight, knowing how sick you were? You continued to fight and know what was wrong when everybody around you, including labs from all around Europe, are telling you you were wrong.
Well, I'm trying to take this experience to help other people now, and to say, if it happened to you, you can do it, you know, because we can do it. And I'm not thinking, oh, how great it was. I'm thinking much more, I was lucky to be able to go there and to have enough money to pay for it, because it was so expensive. And I was lucky that my husband could believe in me, my parents, and let me do it. But I did it by thinking of it and saying, that's the good place to be, and that's what I need to be cured or to be okay again.
But Laura, you're an engineer. You're the one who found this information, and I'm gonna challenge you, because I don't think it was luck. I think that it was your hard work which allowed you to find out what was going on, to bring it to a doctor to validate and treat. Because you said you're lucky enough that you had the money to come to New York, but you couldn't go to other doctors because they were too expensive. So some other doctors you looked at in the States were too pricey and you couldn't come to. So you did have some financial constraints. And we've interviewed, and we know of many people out there that have unlimited financial resources, and they're still sick with Lyme disease, despite having the ability to go anywhere in the world to treat for Lyme, because they're maybe not as in tune with what's going on with their body as you are, and they're not doing the research that you did. So to me, that's not luck. That's perseverance and drive and resourcefulness on your part to find out what was going on, and then to find a place that was within your means, your financial means, like Dr. Cameron, who's willing to work with you to go and get the proper recognition and treatment you needed to get better. So I think you're being a little too humble, because I don't think it's luck. I think it's you, and it's your perseverance and your resourcefulness, which led you to Dr. Cameron to get you better. How do you respond to that?
Thank you so much for saying that. Well, I don't know. I think it was one of the clues was to understand what each medication is doing on your body. And if you understand this, if you then it makes you confident, and you say, okay, I've got this symptom. If I'm taking this, it will work on this like this. And I think I wanted to understand it. Maybe it's a chance that I wasn't a doctor and I wasn't a lawyer, but an engineer for that. But it's okay. I wanted to understand, but I had the chance that it worked. And when I came to see Dr. Cameron, it was like so cool, because first I saw the nurses and they were super nice and helpful, and I was a joy. And they were taking me, wow, how are you doing, Laura? Nice trip and everything. It was so nice to have a great, warm welcome. And then Dr. Cameron believed in me. And he said to me, okay, Laura, all the tests are negative. Okay, but if you are there, you know probably the treatment. And I said, yes, I know. I know what you're going to give me. And he said, what then? And I said, Biaxin and Mepron. And he said, yes, let's try it. And it was a bit funny, because that was the first doctor who said to me, tell me what I have to give you, but he wanted to give me that. And we had done every test possible. So he said, we don't need any more. Also, we could do tests more and more and more, but you're sick. And he listened to me. He believed me. And he prescribed the antibiotic where I had felt the best with in a few weeks before, and that was Biaxin. So
you were on Biaxin, Laura, previously with your other Lyme litter doctor, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And that was the one that you felt it helped you a little bit, but you were getting a little bit of help, but then also you were getting sicker in other ways, right? So when you saw Dr. Cameron, he gave you Biaxin and Mepron, right? So specifically with Dr. Cameron, when you first saw him, what was your initial treatment? Was it Biaxin and something like Malarone?
Yeah, he gave me Mepron, Atovacon, but then after a few months, I had to change, because that's the patient experience, At first, I used to buy Mepron, Atovacon in the States, which is very expensive. Even with good Rx, I had to pay for it every time. And I had to seek the good pharmacy with the best price, which is very different as what we do in Europe. And then I asked Dr. Cameron, what if I take Malarone? Because Malarone in France, especially in France, is much more cheaper. And then I bought everything in France, and it was much more cheaper. But the prescriptions in America are not accepted in Europe. But I had the chance that the doctor in Germany who diagnosed me said, I trust Dr. Cameron, and I will rewrite what is prescribing. And the prescription from Germany is accepted in France. So I had to go to France to find the best price to have my medication. And the craziest thing is that the medication I had is in every pharmacy in France,
So this was a transcontinental treatment,
it.
because but what I'm being blown away by here, Laura, is the fact that your Lyme specialist in Germany refused to recognize the fact that you had Bartonella and Babesia, because her biomagnetism test said no. And you went to Dr. Cameron, who made a clinical diagnosis. You still didn't have the paper. You had no paper saying you had it. but just because a doctor in New York said you had it, now she was willing to treat you. I mean, that in itself is cut. Oh, sorry.
Wait, it's not the same. It's not the special Lyme specialist, she said, that said you don't have Babesia. It's the 70th doctor who said you got Lyme disease, who gave me Ceftin. That's the first one who gave the diagnosis, because he wasn't so much aware of Lyme disease. I would test it. So he said, okay, I have confidence in Dr. Cameron because I don't know.
Oh, so you did not go back to the Lyme specialist. You went back to the internist who diagnosed you initially and gave you your initial treatment that made you really sick, right?
I didn't want to lose time, If she said, I'm not believing in your Babesia or Bartonella, why would you go back to her,
Right. So you went back to the internist who was willing to work with you, but wasn't a Lyme specialist and was honest enough to admit that, but trusted Dr. Cameron's expertise. So, but what I find interesting is that here in the States, we get prescribed Mepron, which is really pure Atovaquone. And you were doing that and it was super expensive, it sounds like, with the Biaxin. And then now Malarone is pretty affordable through this prescription in France. And Malarone is really just Atovaquone with what I think was called Proguanil. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's still very heavy with Atovaquone. But why couldn't you get that in Germany? Germany doesn't have Malarone available. You had to go to France to get it.
No, they have them, but much more expensive. And I got in France, you don't have Mepron in the pharmacy. You get it in the hospital only with small doses. So you can't get it, but you could get it in Germany, Mepron. It's crazy because it's very different. We are small countries in comparison to America, and it's very different wherever you live.
So again, you were using your resourcefulness because you don't have unlimited money. You don't have, all this money you can just waste on medication. So you found that Malarone was affordable and something you could buy in France. So you bought this through France to now treat in coordination with a doctor from New York, living in Germany, buying your medication in France, just so you can heal from Lyme disease and Babesia and Bartonella, right?
Yeah, and it was working.
So walk us through that. I mean, so now how is this relationship with Dr. Cameron? So is Dr. Cameron talking to your internist that you're working with in collaboration? Are they working together to treat you? Or are you going back to New York? What is that like? Are you traveling? Give us some more details on that.
Well, I went to see Dr. Cameron every 2 months. I went to New York 12 times. So I know New York, and Manhattan is for me a very nice town, and I love it. And maybe I can explain on the second appointment with Dr. Cameron. I went alone because the first time I went with Emmanuel, and then I could come alone. I used to live at a friend apartment to avoid to pay too much, and it was nice because I wasn't alone, and I had to travel then 7 or 8 hours, and then I had to lie down one day to reduce my fatigue. Then I traveled to Dr. Cameron, came back, tried to find the medication, and then I had to fly back. And it took me 6 days every 2 months to do it because I was so weak, And at the second appointment, Dr. Cameron said to me, he asked to me, are you working now? Are you working again? And I laughed and I said, how could I work in my condition, And he said, but you should. I came back to Germany, and 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from an old client saying, we are trying to find somebody to be a sales assistant in our store in Cologne, which was not my job. And I said, I could do it, but I cannot do it all the day long. I can do it once a week, 1 day a week. And I said, okay, come. And it was a new challenge for me because I was sales assistant in a decoration store. And cognitively, I lost everything I took. So each object, how do you say, each like curtain or something I was holding could fall down. So I have to concentrate all the time. And I went to work at in the middle of the day. I had 1 hour stop, and I went to Starbucks and like in a sofa to have a rest. And but I did achieve it. I could work 8 hours per week, and I didn't tell anything about my condition because I wanted to be a normal person. And it was very important for me to feel normal again. I could work a bit, and it could pay my travel to New York, for example. Not everything, but a part of it. And Dr. Cameron was good with me for it because he gave me the motivation for that, even if at the beginning I was thinking, hey, he's crazy. What is he asking for? I can't do it.
So Laura, I just want to say, if you do ever end up back in New York, you need to let us know so maybe we can meet you in person, because we are in New York as well. So we'd love that if you ever come back.
I would love to.
But I also want to ask, so when you went back to Dr. Cameron, I think you said 2 months after your first appointment, right? Was that what you said?
Yeah.
And he said to you, are you working? And your response was, how can I work? Now, do you think that physically you were able to work, but it was just you didn't realize you were? Because it sounds like, your reaction was, there's no way I can work. But then 2 weeks later, you're working an 8-hour day and you're doing it and you're able to do it successfully. So where was the disconnect? Was it you thought you were sicker than you were?
Well, I was working 8 hours once a week, not 8 hours a day, which is very, very little.
But it's still a lot after being sick with chronic Lyme. An 8-hour day once a week is very difficult for somebody as sick as you were, and as many of us are. So do you think that you thought you were much sicker and didn't realize how much you were healed over those 2 months after treating with Dr. Cameron?
I think there is something crazy in this disease. I think if you want very deep inside of you, if you want to achieve something, you can do it. If I remember the day I went to New York to travel to New York, I couldn't sit properly at this time because too much pain. I couldn't walk properly. I had cognitive issue, but I made it. I went to New York and I could even go to visit a few places with my husband. And I wanted it so much, so deep inside me. So I said, I will do it anyway. So maybe it's one thing, and I see this in a few patients that I meet, that if you want it very, very, very deep inside, you can do it. But I must say also 2 things. One is that after 2 months, after like 3-4 weeks, I started the treatment, start slow, go slow. Thank you to American people who are saying this, and that's the big thing I learned. And it started to help me. I was feeling a bit better. Like 3 minutes, I didn't have any pain. And then you can see it. And you said, hey, funny, for 3 minutes, I didn't have any pain. But pain is coming back. And then, but the treatment was working. So I had confidence in it. I needed money to pay a bit more of my treatment. Plus, I think I was afraid of me. And that was a big thing. I was afraid of what I was able to do. I didn't know.
What do you mean? So Laura, I just want to make sure I understand that. When you say you were afraid of yourself and you didn't know what you were able to do you mean that you were afraid to push yourself? You were afraid to do something that you didn't think you could because you didn't know how you'd respond and if it would make you feel so much worse. Is that what you mean?
Yes and no, because sometimes I had the feeling my head wanted to do something and my body couldn't follow it, couldn't do it. And the feeling was my body is doing alone things I don't want to. And maybe because of my cognitive issues, part of my head is doing what I don't want to. And I had some changes too in my life. For example, my taste. For example, I couldn't eat garlic. It made me sick before the sickness. And then came Lyme disease, and I love garlic. And that's not a problem for me, And it was a bit weird for me, but I was sometimes afraid of my reactions because I knew there is something inside me deciding for me sometimes things.
So really it worked both ways, where sometimes you wanted to do more than your body was telling you could. And then there were other times where you were afraid to do things that your body could do, and you didn't want to do them because you were afraid of how you were going to react. So it really was both ways, you're telling me, right?
That's it.
Now, so we know Dr. Cameron is sort of your saving grace here. And well, really, he was the one who was able to give you the tools you needed to heal. You're your saving grace, Laura, because you're the one who is responsible for where you are today. But it sounds like you just continued to get better and better and better. And what I'm seeing here is when you were treating with the Lyme specialist, you were doing the pulsed antibiotics, and it was too much, too soon, too aggressively. And it was also missing Babesia. And we know Babesia is a parasitic bloodborne infection. If you don't address that, you're never going to fully recover from Lyme. And you were hitting Lyme disease too hard, and you weren't addressing Babesia. Now you go to Dr. Cameron, who says to you, we got to take it slow and steady. And you're starting to see improvements because you're taking it slower, and you're now treating the Babesia, the parasitic infection, and the Bartonella, and you're making these small gains. So walk us through, you were diagnosed about 7 years ago, and this has been a long journey, but I mean, clearly you're in amazing shape today. You're an advocate over in Germany and in France is how we found you on social media across the world. So how did your health continue to improve treating with Dr. Cameron over the last 7 years? And start to talk to us about your transformation into doing the work you're doing today.
Well, I was treated then 4 years long since the first time I saw Dr. Cameron. And now I can say I consider me healthy in my illness. It's like, I think Babesia has left me entirely, but I know that Bartonella and Lyme are like two lions in my body. And they are being tamed, but I'm still very aware of them. And if they show me signs, I do something in a minute, but some things very like vitamins, but not hardcore medication. Well, at the moment, I'm feeling great. Well, I'm regularly take B vitamins. I go twice a week to the gym and the pool. I ride my bike. I do hardcore runs. I do infrared sauna sessions. I make sure I got enough sleep. Try to eat correctly. But, I am recovering from years of, the most important is I'm recovering from years of a social life so undeveloped that even it's complicated in the moment with COVID, I am enjoying each dinner, each outing with friends or family. And that's changed my life.
So Laura, in addition to your appreciation for all of the little things that perhaps you didn't appreciate the way you did before, you've also become an advocate. And I think that's a really exciting part of your transformation. You're an author. You've written a book entitled I Overcame Lyme Disease. You are running a website where you're updating information to people in both German and French languages so that you can advocate for people there. You've also gone through a professional transformation where you went from being an engineer to being a coach, a health coach. So talk to us about all of those different things and what motivated you to go from the person who was healing herself to a person who now wants to help heal other people.
Well, first of all, I think because I was feeling better and recovering, I had a lot of contact with people, friends who called me and said, hey, what are your tips about Lyme disease? What could help? Because my friend or friend has got Lyme disease. And in France, in Germany, you got a lot of, like in America, Lyme disease is also everywhere. And at the moment I said, okay, maybe I have to write a book to say that it's so crazy to have to travel to America and even even if we can find medication down the street in France to get better. So I wanted to write a book to say, you can achieve it. You can be better. You can find the solution. First, you have to learn what is happening in your body. You have to believe in you. And you have to tell it to the doctor. And I wrote this book. And it was not easy to write this book because it made me back in my story. It was not so therapeutic, positive, but I know it helped a lot of people. Even if some people with Lyme disease cannot read, because I understand this. We can't concentrate. but it helped. And then it gave me the opportunity to study therapeutic patient education at the Sorbonne University of Medicine. And I continue now even to learn at the Sorbonne University. At the moment, I am in a patient teacher program, and I will study in Montreal, in Canada, about partnership between patients and caregivers. It's starting next week.
So you're keeping your international travels a part of your experience.
Well, it's Zoom. It's per Zoom now. You know, you can sit in your office and learn, and that's not a problem. I didn't have to go to Paris, even if I love it. But thank COVID, everything is through Zoom, and we can still learn. And now I'm working as a Lyme disease health coach, and I am doing Lyme advocacy especially for France at the moment. Well, the diploma from therapeutic patient education gave me the status of expert patient. And this concept is showing that you've got a significant knowledge about your disease, and you can use it for your self-management of the disease, and you are more efficient with it, but you can better communicate with health professionals, and you can act as an educator for other patients. And that's a big help for that. And as a coach, I think I give to patients first do not feel alone, which is a big problem, I think, with Lyme disease. I don't let them down. I am there for them. I listen to them and I say, I believe in you. And sometimes I have to tell even that it's hard, because sometimes it's helpful to hear it as a patient. I know what you are through. That's a hard path. That's very complicated. And I try to motivate them to explain each medication they get, because if you take it by thinking of what the medication is doing, I think the treatment is working better. And so you explain it. I explain it about co-infection, how it is, and sometimes I go with patient to doctor appointments to help them, because doctors don't have the same language as we as patient. And I'm like a bridge between the patient and the doctor. I'm like a translator between two languages. And sometimes it's so emotional, to go to a doctor when you're sick, in pain, you don't remember everything. And each time when I go to a doctor with a patient, I give back like a sketch note at the end to remember what was said. And I think it's something very important and helpful for the patient. And at the same time, so I develop this coaching program. And at the same time, I created a group called Preface for Patient Resource Facilitator Europe. And we are 5 expert patients in Europe from 5 nationalities. And we are working to help to strengthen the voice of the patients with infectious disease. We are working to develop the patient-caregiver partnership, to support patient research, to promote legislative changes. And in this case, we worked with, in March, with members of the National Assembly in Paris to speak as an expert patient for the first time about Lyme disease. They asked the doctors and the researchers, but for the first time they said, okay, we want to hear the voice of the patients. And in Canada, there is a great program. I will send it to you. They published a very strong project with the researcher Marie-Pascale Paumet, and it's called Developing Recommendation for the Diagnosis and Treatment of Lyme Disease, the Role of the Patient's Perspective in a Controversial Environment. And you can find it on the web, and it shows how much good it could be when it's well done, what the patient can give with his own experience.
And you certainly know how bad it can be having to work with 69 doctors who couldn't diagnose you, all of whom, or many of whom gaslit you, all of whom resulted in you suffering from medical trauma, and how things changed when you got to your 70th and your 71st and your 72nd doctor. And so much of that could have been avoided had there been the mindset that patients are an important part of the diagnostic and treatment journey that we are now starting to develop with great advocates like you. But I can't help to observe the connection between the young girl who had the desire to be a lawyer or an advocate and the young girl who thought about becoming a doctor or a medical healer, and then ultimately the young girl who became an engineer, and how all of these different skill sets have now come together and manifested in one person and one career path, where you're now advocating and you're helping people heal and you're helping them to engineer a path forward toward their healing. And isn't it beautiful that although you looked like you had to sort of make a selection between lawyer, doctor, or engineer as a little girl, how you've now merged that all together and now become a health coach, which uses all three skill sets.
Thank you for saying it so well. So good.
So now we need a little more help from you. And I'm actually more excited to ask you this question than any of the almost 250 people we've interviewed before. And the reason I'm more excited to ask you this question is because you appear to have a more comprehensive set of tools than anyone else we've ever asked this question to about what to do if you suffer a tick bite. So if God forbid one of your children came into the room, and I'm going to choose Felix. If God forbid Felix came into the room right after this interview and showed you that he was suffering from a tick bite, what steps would you take so that your child would not have to go on a terrible Lyme disease journey?
Well, the steps are explained on my website. So if you speak French, you go there, and I would connect on my website, not to be too emotionally affected, and read again all the steps I would do. But it's a bit different in France or in the States how we are doing it, because in the States you are likely sending the tick to some place to be analyzed. It's not so often that we do it at our place, even if we can send the tick to a tick library for the research. So it's interesting to do this in France. But the thing I would say, maybe, we take the tick out. I would take a photo of it, of the tick of the place of your body where you were bitten, and remember, if your kid has got ear with a lila, or what's this color in violet in English, mark, or some fever, or a small fever, or sore throat, even if he hasn't got the red mark, the traditional red mark with a tick bite, you have to do something, and fast. And you have to take antibiotics, that's clear, and take naturopathy things all at the same time. But do something, be aware of it, and go to my website to see.
All right, Laura, we will certainly go to your website, and we will compare our tick bite blueprint to your blueprint, and we'll hopefully help one another to improve the recommendations that we're both making to folks in the community if they get bitten by a tick. But I can't thank you enough for joining us on the Tick Bootcamp podcast. You were an absolute pleasure, and we really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for listening to our Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Laura Arnal. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Laura, please visit her on Instagram at Laura__Arnal, ARNAL. Second, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a tick bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. Please note we appreciate any input or improvements you would like to share with us. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, we thank you, our community, for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or on social media. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews you share with us. As always, thank you for listening.